Rain dripped from the brim of his worn-out cap as Daniel Parker stood outside the small florist shop, his heart pounding harder than the storm. The old truck behind him coughed out one last sputter before dying completely, as if mocking the life he'd been struggling to keep alive. He stared at the $15 crumpled in his calloused hand, the last of his savings, and thought about turning back. But then he remembered the message that had changed his week. "I'd love to meet you for coffee." For months, he had been too scared to hope for something like this. It had been 2 years since his wife passed, leaving him to raise his 6-year-old daughter, Lily, on his own. Between 2 part-time jobs, unpaid bills, and the constant ache of missing someone he couldn't replace, Daniel had forgotten what it felt like to look forward to anything. But when Claire from the dating app had laughed at his corny jokes and said she admired his love for his daughter, something inside him flickered again. He wanted to show up with something special, even if it was small. So, despite the ache in his chest and the emptiness in his wallet, Daniel stepped into the florist shop and spent his last $15 on a single white rose wrapped in a ribbon. Backhand index pointing right. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of love that finds you when you least expect it, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. It helps us bring you more stories that touch the heart. When Daniel arrived at the cafe, he hesitated at the door. His reflection in the glass looked tired, his denim jacket faded, his hair slightly messy from the rain, his eyes carrying the weight of too many sleepless nights. He worried she'd take one look at him and leave. But when he finally stepped inside, he saw her sitting by the window. Claire was nothing like he imagined. She was poised, calm, and effortlessly elegant. Her auburn hair fell over a soft gray coat, her posture straight, her eyes kind but sharp, like someone used to giving orders and being obeyed. She smiled when she saw him, and for a moment, he forgot the world. He offered her the rose awkwardly, half apologizing for its simplicity. But when she took it, her eyes softened in a way that made him feel like he'd just handed her the most precious thing in the world. They sat for hours talking about everything: books, music, childhood memories, dreams they hadn't dared to chase. She laughed at his stories about Lily and asked questions that made him feel seen in ways no one had in years. But underneath the warmth of the evening, Daniel carried a quiet shame. He could barely afford his share of the coffee. He'd spent his last few dollars on the flour and gas to get there. Every time Claire reached for her purse, he insisted on paying, even though it meant emptying his pockets completely. She smiled softly, almost as if she understood something he didn't say. When they parted, Claire touched his hand gently. "Thank you," she said, her voice sincere. "You have no idea how much this meant to me." Daniel drove home through the rain in silence, feeling both uplifted and terrified. He didn't know if she'd want to see him again once she realized he wasn't the kind of man with fancy cars or a successful career. He was just a single dad with a heart that still believed in love, even when life had given him every reason not to. The next day, he woke up early to prepare breakfast for Lily before school. The little girl smiled up at him with sleepy eyes, her hair a mess of curls. "Daddy, did your date like the flower?" she asked between bites of toast. He smiled. "I think she did." But as the week went by, Daniel didn't hear from Claire. No calls, no messages. He told himself she was probably busy. People like her, graceful, confident, and put together, didn't usually end up with people like him. Still, every night, he checked his phone before bed. Nothing. Then, 3 weeks later, while cleaning tables at the diner where he worked nights, Daniel looked up to see a familiar face walk in. Claire. Except this time, she wasn't dressed casually. She was wearing a tailored navy suit, her hair perfectly styled, her demeanor different, commanding. The entire staff went silent as she spoke quietly to the manager and then turned toward him. Daniel froze. She smiled that same soft smile, walked up to his table, and said, "You didn't tell me you work here." He fumbled for words. "Yeah, just part-time. Helps pay for things." She nodded, her eyes kind but knowing. "Do you have a break soon?" Minutes later, they were sitting outside on the diner's small patio. Claire looked around quietly before turning to him. "I didn't mean to disappear," she said gently. "I had to go overseas for work. I wasn't sure if I'd see you again." Daniel nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He didn't want pity. He didn't want her to feel sorry for him. Then she added, almost shyly, "I'm the CEO of a company called Preston and Company. It's probably not a name you've heard, but It takes up most of my life." He blinked. Preston and Company was a multi-million-dollar firm. He'd seen the name on buildings, trucks, even billboards. His stomach dropped. She was a millionaire CEO, and he had shown up to their date with a single flower and a coffee he could barely afford. But before he could say anything, she reached out, her fingers brushing his hand. "That night, you reminded me what real people are like," she said softly. "You didn't try to impress me. You didn't know who I was. You just listened. You made me laugh. I haven't felt that normal in years." Daniel's throat tightened. He didn't know what to say. She smiled again, that gentle one that always disarmed him. "I'd like to see you again, if you'll let me." From that day on, their worlds began to intertwine in unexpected ways. Claire met Lily, and the two bonded instantly. She'd bring little gifts, not expensive ones, but thoughtful ones, a coloring book, a cupcake, a set of crayons. For the first time, Daniel saw Lily laugh the way she used to before her mother passed. 8 months passed. Daniel's life began to change too. Claire quietly helped him find a better job at a warehouse through her contacts, though she never took credit for it. She visited the diner sometimes, sitting in his section just to see him. They talked for hours after closing, sharing quiet dreams over coffee refills. One evening, as they walked along the park with Lily running ahead of them, Claire said something that stopped him cold. "You know," she whispered, "the first time I met you, I was planning to cancel that date. I'd grown tired of people pretending to like me for my money. I didn't think anyone could see me for who I really was anymore." Daniel looked at her, his heart swelling. "And now?" She smiled through the fading sunset. "Now I do." Months later, as Christmas lights shimmered across the city, Daniel found himself standing once again in front of that same florist shop. This time, he wasn't counting pennies. He bought 3 roses, one for Claire, one for Lily, and one for the memory of the woman he had lost. Life had come full circle, not because of luck or money, but because kindness had found its way back to him. That night, as they sat together by the fireplace, Lily asleep on Claire's lap, Daniel whispered a quiet thank you. To life, to love, and to the moment he decided to spend his last $15 on a single rose.